Good afternoon. On behalf of IDC and InterSystems, I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Integration, the Foundation for Digital Transformation. Before we begin, I have two quick little housekeeping notes. First, please make sure that all your microphones and telephones are on mute. And secondly, if you have any questions, please feel free to submit them at any time during the webinar using the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of the screen. Our speakers today are Dan Vissette of IDC Research and Joe Lichtenberg of InterSystems. Dan will be presenting IDC's views, learnings, and recommendations on digital transformation and the requirements for a DX platform. Then Joe will talk about how InterSystems customers and partners are successfully navigating the digital transformation landscape and how the InterSystems Iris data platform is fulfilling the promise of the intelligent core. Let me now turn things over to Dan Vissette. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you. Thanks, and thank you all for joining us. So let's start with the definition of digital transformation. And by the way, sometimes at IDC we refer to it by the acronym DX, and it may mean different things to different people, but you might see me or hear me switch between the acronym and full digital transformation. So just so we're all level set. And I think it's important to start with the definition because there is a risk of digital transformation becoming just a buzzword, which it doesn't have to be. And it isn't for many organizations. We see organizations take a structured approach to transformation, and I'm hoping that today's webcast will be one of several that will help you as you contemplate or proceed with your digital transformation initiatives. So what you see on the screen now is IDC's definition. We're one of the largest global IT market research firms. We interview hundreds and survey tens of thousands of IT and business decision makers annually. And here is what we have learned from them. So we define digital transformation as a continuous process by which organizations adapt to disruptive changes in the market by leveraging digital competencies, to innovate business models, products, and services that blend the digital and physical, as well as business and customer experiences. I think this type of definition helps us kind of move beyond the hype and instead to really focus and understand capabilities needed for this type of transformation. Now, if we move to the next slide, we also need to mention that there still are skeptics. We run into skeptics all the time, and I would point them to this data point from a study by McKinsey Consulting that they did in 2017. I think it's a great data point, and they said that in less than a decade, new digital entrants have already seized 17% of revenue across regions and industries on average. And my own interpretation of where this might go is that it's reasonable to assume that over the next decade, this share, the 17%, will likely more than double. You know, there's no reason to I think, doubt that. And that creates urgency in starting the DX journey. And I think it's also important to say that it should be viewed as a journey, maybe another overused term a bit, but we find that most enterprises take about a 3 to 5 years to reach a point of substantial transformation, obviously with various thresholds and milestones along the way. So we're not talking here about a once and done technology deployment. Next slide, please. So lately, as we have been working with organizations to better understand their digital transformation paths, several leaders have expressed concern about whether their organization has the determination to stick with these initiatives. These leaders, they know what needs to be done, but sometimes they feel a lack of empowerment to get it done. Sometimes it's an issue of the CEO not making the difficult organizational moves. Sometimes they see multiple strategies being deployed across the company, sometimes slightly conflicting strategies. And other times they just see short-term funding decisions. So you may be asking yourself whether your organization is digitally determined. So let me, on the next slide, going to share some data points, and maybe this can act as a sort of a live self-assessment tool for you. So let me go through kind of 5 questions and so show results of IDC's research to those 5 questions, and you can compare yourself to them. So when it comes to your organizational structure, do you have a separate digital group, or have you evolved the ownership and budgeting to sit within the entire organization? And as you can see from the data, and this was a survey conducted in June of 2018, almost 2,000 organizations worldwide, in digitally determined organizations. So first of all, I should say that we segmented organizations into what we're calling digitally determined and digitally distraught. So determined being the leading category here. So in that first leading category, we see them 2 times more likely to have embedded digital transformation throughout the organization. The second question is, do you have a single digital strategy across the enterprise? Or is your digital strategy comprised of multiple strategies? Again, all determined organizations have a single DX strategy. So this was 100 versus 0 here. The third question is, does your organization take a long-term view to the funding of its initiatives, digital initiatives? In digitally determined organizations, they are more likely to fund their DX initiatives through capital budget as opposed to expense relief. And finally, the fourth question is, has your organization pulled together a digital technology innovation through a single integrated platform? In digitally determined organizations, they have or are working towards that type of a single platform. And that's what I would like to focus on a little bit today. So in the next slide, we see that the reality is that many organizations do get stuck. So this is a form of a maturity model, if you will, where we looked at, in this case, 400 organizations. And this is substantiated by other interviews and surveys that we have done. It suggests that about 3/4 of enterprises are at this digital deadlock, usually because they're not following the blueprint that I just mentioned. They're not investing in all aspects of digital transformation. And we want to talk a little bit about today, or how do you get across that deadlock? How do you get over that bump in the road? So on the next slide, really just wanted to show here that digital transformation does require more than technology transformation. Lasting change has to come from transforming all aspects of the organization. But today we'll focus on the platform. If you're looking for more information from IDC, we're happy to share that on other aspects of transformation. So if we go to the next slide, this is how we have decided to pick the digital transformation platform. So this is obviously a conceptual diagram, which must be accompanied by traditional architectural diagrams. But I think the visual itself is important because it helps us get out of the mode of thinking about traditional technology stacks and highlights the need for integration. So we're not kind of creating a traditional stack with databases at the bottom and applications on the top, with operational applications on one side, analytic applications and data warehouses on the other side. We want to emphasize this integration. IDC defines this digital transformation platform as a technology architecture that accelerates digital transformation initiatives for the enterprise, enabling the rapid creation of externally facing digital products, services, and experiences, while also aggressively modernizing the internal IT environment toward an intelligent core that turns data into actions. In this new platform, everything is connected to everything else. Data are brought into your enterprise through connected assets, your employees, or connected processes. These data are routed through the intelligent core, which can pull out these insights, and I'll talk about the intelligent core in a bit. And those insights are injected back into your applications to improve internal processes, to create a new set of intelligent applications. But the data are also drawn into your ecosystem engagements, through bots, through mobile devices, and from various external data sources. So another trend that we're seeing, an active use of external third-party data sources. And these data are also routed through the intelligent core, which turns the data into actions to be taken when engaging with the ecosystem. Now, in our view, this platform provides and uses 4 different types of services. So there's the intelligent core, There are integration and orchestration services, developer services, and engagement and experience services. And we'll focus today on the intelligent core. So if we go to the next slide, it provides a little bit more detail, where the intelligent core is where the algorithms, the code, the models live that enable you to glean the insights and subsequent actions from the data. Some of these insights and actions refer to business level decisions. So it could be, should we lend to a customer in a financial services setting? Is this a fraudulent transaction? Could be another one. What's the next best offer we should make in retail or other consumer-oriented businesses? But others refer to decisions also about the data management process itself. So we need to expand kind of how we look at decision making. And some of these could be how should the data be monitored? How should it be processed, stored, analyzed, visualized? How should it be embedded into other applications? All of these are types of decisions that are supported by this platform. These are all decisions made today by developers or admins in large part because the enterprise has lacked all the necessary data to move from deterministic to probabilistic methods when investing in decision automation. But that is starting to change. That's what we're seeing. And a new generation of technology has become available that incorporates analytics and various forms of machine learning to start automating some of the tasks and activities in this process. Let's put this into terms highlighted to me by one CIO of a large telecommunications provider that I worked with recently. And this is a notion that has been echoed by others across industries in manufacturing, in healthcare, in retail, in transportation. And so this CIO specifically said, my business executives, so this is his voice, my business executives have stepped onto the path of digital transformation. As an IT leader, I have the option to continue to support their information needs as individual requests arrive, which has been the mode of operation for years, or I can be proactive in transforming our entire enterprise data management architecture and solutions into an agile, scalable, and extensible platform. And we believe that enterprises that are able to re-architect for this type of scale using this digital transformation platform approach will stand out as most likely to be digitally transformed in the next 3 to 5 years. In this particular case with this telco, they now have a platform where they are able to spin up new applications within just a few weeks, which would have previously taken them months or even more. So this is an example of a success story and one that did take a little bit over 3 years in that case. Let's go to the next slide. And I think it's worth emphasizing the urgency in moving toward the new platform because the data environment is not getting any simpler, at least not in the near term. Here, what I'm showing are results from another IDC study where we asked about the changes that enterprises are experiencing or have experienced in the past 12 to 24 months. So, for example, 64% said that they have started to use new data sources or new data types. So we see significant expansion in the use of unstructured data and semi-structured data alongside operational data. 41% said they started using new analytic methods, many of them going into predictive and sometimes even into prescriptive analytics. With those changes, 67% said that they have significant changes to data management and analytics architecture. And very importantly, 65% said that they started measuring or tracking new KPIs. So why I think this is probably the most important metric is that because it indicates that they're willing to challenge the status quo. They're asking new questions. They're looking to track new metrics and KPIs, and that's a sign of a transformation. And then in the middle, the 17% refers to those that said that they're doing, they have done all 4 of these things in the past 12 to 24 months. So they're handling a lot of change all at once. And this environment is, I think, going to continue in the foreseeable future, which again suggests the need for a unified platform. So if we move to the next slide, and if we take one step down, deeper into the intelligent core, we see two categories of capabilities, and you'll see a lot of familiar terminology in those darker and lighter orange section. But now think of each of these as a microservice provided by the platform that brings all of these capabilities together. We've seen that for years, CIO's efforts have focused on improving efficiency of managing the so-called 3 V's of big data: volume, velocity, and variety. And also on the what we'll call here today the 3 I's: integration, data integrity, and data intelligence. The data cataloging, for example, or master metadata management. These capabilities don't fall away. A lot of companies have gone through, perhaps yours has as well, in launching data lakes, for example. But oftentimes these still remain discrete projects, and they're not unified with a single platform. We think that as enterprises are facing more complex and a new approach is needed. The attention of IT leaders, the CIOs, must be flipped from these 3 V's to what we're calling the 3 A's: awareness, augmentation, and automation, which are the 3 elements of our comprehensive enterprise intelligence vision. A critical step on the journey to achieving this vision is to reorient the existing information management and analytics architecture toward specialized and optimized data management capabilities in the form of these services that I talked about, that will manifest themselves in a new architecture that intelligently orchestrates data across a network of core and edge entities. So these could be machines, it could be things, it could be humans, apps, bots, data stores, where the intelligence will be derived from machine learning-based constant monitoring, diagnostics, prediction, and prescription, which by and large is not happening today or hasn't happened in the past. And these data management capabilities will form the basis of comprehensive awareness about the state and events affecting your enterprise from within and outside. They will enable augmentation of human decision makers with machine-generated recommendations. So it's important, I think, to mention that it's not replacement of people with machines, but they will also allow for deployment of adaptable self-learning decision automation solutions for those tactical decisions or operational decisions where there are millions and millions of data points and perhaps tens of thousands of decisions that are being done on a daily basis. And this view also opens the ability to look at all requests that IT is getting through the lens of use case patterns rather than lower level discrete requests. So going back to those comments by the telco CIO, he did not want to continue to be in the business of dealing with one-off requests and starting each project as if it was a new project. So to do that, if we go on to the next slide, I wanted to kind of first summarize the lessons learned and then get into some of the views on those use cases. So the lessons learned for us from talking to these organizations is that there's a real need to identify use case patterns, and I'll say what I mean by that patterns part of this, to develop a roadmap across those patterns, and then to articulate the value generation from digital transformation. So if we go to the next slide, this shows the 8 use case patterns, and the way to look at the slide is to start with the strategic priority, which in this case would be deriving value from the data. And so this is industry agnostic, it's function agnostic, it's deriving value from data. Underneath that strategic priority are programs that support the strategic priority. Each represents a long-term plan of action to achieve the strategic priority through a series of use cases. And it's helpful to think of these as use case patterns, in fact, because you'll notice that they're not defined as business use cases. Each of your companies has their own use cases. There are some that may be common across your industry. There's some that may be specific to your firm. But these use cases in the white rectangles, these are discretely funded efforts supporting a program objective. They can be thought of as specific projects, Each use case is organized and can be defined by a name, as you'll see here. You can define the current situation, the as-is situation, business goals and objectives, key technologies used to enable the desired business outcomes, and a summary of the types of results you may want to get out of this use case. So if you take, just for an example, decision automation is one of the programs, and it's associated with investments to support tactical decision-making within the flow of operations, as opposed to something like enterprise performance management, which is more associated with what we think of typically as for example, planning and forecasting in the finance function, or data exploration and investigation, which would be more typically associated with traditional business intelligence. So decision automation, there we see two variants: conditional decision automation, which typically has been based on rules engines, and then we're now starting to see emergence of algorithmic decision automation, infusing machine learning into the process. And so we can go through all of these programs. I'm not going to do that on the webcast today. I'll highlight just the last one here on data monetization. This is one that's emerging as an active area for some of the digital transformation projects. So here we have DaaS, which stands in this case for data as a service. And more companies are looking to monetize their data externally. So they're enriching their business operations with data sometimes to create greater stickiness for the services and products they're providing. And other times they are providing these data services as a standalone business. And again, so sometimes it's direct revenue generation, and sometimes it's a companion offering to another product or service. Now, if we go to the next slide, we also find that successful enterprises while they develop a single roadmap tied to digital strategy, they also break the roadmap into horizons. And I think that's critical in assessing where to start. So you begin by identifying the most important use cases you will be that you can add to your digital roadmap, and then spreading the other two across the three horizons. And again, it's a little bit difficult to be very prescriptive here. It may be that you have a better understanding of what is that low-hanging fruit within your organization and where your capabilities are. And again, typically we see the roadmaps are focused on this 3 to 5 year horizon. So the horizon one portion of your roadmap may consist of the use cases you are deploying today and the underlying technology, obviously, to support them. Horizon 2 of your roadmap may include the items that you are incubating today. And then Horizon 3 or that portion of your roadmap is more about imagining the possibilities. So maybe you're exploring the use of augmented or virtual reality or blockchain for your enterprise use, and it's still early days. You're exploring those capabilities. So in building your roadmap like this, you're moving from very executable to more abstract projects as you move across the horizons. And what we see happening is that most digital roadmaps consist of the programs and use cases only in that first horizon. And this can be problematic because you don't think through how it will scale and what technologies you should be looking at or investing in after those initial use cases are addressed. So if we move on to the next slide, and so this would be the third lesson learned from our work with a number of different companies. So here we're really talking about value generation, or articulating the value generation, and that may help in funding some of the next projects as well, because it has to move beyond just cost cutting and cost control. So some of the examples that we're seeing is developer productivity. So I mentioned, again, going back to the telco example I showed before, being able to launch production-ready applications, new intelligent set of applications very rapidly within weeks. I think that second point, the new intelligent apps is also critical. We see now applications that combine analytics and transaction processing increasingly in one solution. And with that comes inevitably also the ability for to handle real-time operational workloads rather than having to always stand up a separate analytic data store where data at rest is being analyzed at some fixed intervals. We also find that there is an improved data trust and data integrity when when it's clear where the data came from, when the data lineage is being exposed to the users, and more comprehensive data sets and more granular data sets are being exposed to the ultimate decision makers. Another value generation that should be emphasized is, again, decision automation. So, and going back to those use case patterns, viewing analytics and machine learning and data management as ways to support a very broad range of decisions, not just those made by executives or a few analysts or data scientists. So here we're talking about decision automation that supports frontline employees both in the front office and back office. And finally, business model transformation. So there are examples like the one I mentioned before in being able to monetize data externally that stem from these digital transformation efforts and the availability of the intelligent core. So let me finish up on the next slide with an idea that I came across from Michael Schrage, who is a research fellow at MIT. I'd love to share that with you. And he brought up this 80-20 rule, which we're all familiar with. Came from Pareto. It is known as the Pareto principle. It's been since 1896 is when he did that. And the statement that he made was that for many events, roughly 80% of the effects come from 20% of the causes. So, for example, 20% of customers are driving 80% of sales, or 20% of employees are responsible for 80% of the innovation, and so on. However, I think it's time to kind of rethink this. And having a digital platform and its intelligent core with new data management, analytics, and machine learning capabilities has allowed some leading enterprises to go beyond this rule of thumb. So here's a couple of examples. So by tracking data at a more granular level and in real time, they are able to assess more precisely which 20% exactly of customers are responsible for 80% of the impact. So which 20% of the platform's updates will have 80% of the impact. So here is an example of support for IT-centric decisions. Or they see that it's not 80-20, because it really is just a rule of thumb, that it's maybe 15% of causes result in 85% of the effects, or 10% of causes result in 50% of effects. And these seemingly small changes result in outsized benefits that allow an organization to reach that next level of performance on the digital platform. So what if you had this capability? If you have any follow-up questions on this, I'd love to take those either as questions on today's webcast, or feel free to follow up with me at a later point. And with that, I'll pass the mic to Joe Lichtenberg of InterSystems.
Dan, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for joining. My name is Joe Lichtenberg. I'm responsible for product and industry marketing here at InterSystems, and I would like to start today with a little bit of market data, a little bit of a market overview. So we know that most organizations have been working on their digital transformation initiatives for quite a while now. So I'd like to sort of size that effort. So according to IDC and McKinsey and other sources, this year organizations will have spent over $1 trillion just on technology and services supporting digital transformation initiatives. And believe it or not, over $250 billion just on software spend alone. And those numbers are growing, and they're expected to continue to grow. So this year's software spend is on digital transformation is projected to be the fastest growing technology category for the year, with an 18.8% compound annual growth rate. And yet, the failure rate of digital transformation initiatives is still overwhelmingly high. So we heard Dan say that 76% of organizations are at what IDC calls a DX deadlock. I've seen McKinsey reporting that 70% of these initiatives fail. I've seen other estimates that are as high as 80%. So what I'd like to do is drill in and explore some of the main reasons for this lack of success, especially in light of all of this effort and investment. So there are many reasons, as you can see, and we've seen many surveys like this one that quantify the challenges associated with digital transformation. So this one recent survey is from the consulting firm A.T. Kearney. And for sure, organizational issues are always at or near the top of these lists, especially the difficulties working across large, disparate organizations with different organizational silos and reporting structures, and the challenges of getting IT and the line of business to work more closely. But we see technology issues, especially around working with legacy applications and integrating technology silos and data silos from different parts of the organization, are also always at or near the top. And Dan spoke about siloed initiatives and silos of innovation and the importance of a technology core that can integrate these silos. And that's been our experience as well. So making it easier to connect up the disparate information silos, that can go a long way towards accelerating digital transformation initiatives and improving results. So what I'd like to do is share with you some of the key learnings and success patterns from our engagements with our customers and our partners. And so, this comes from working with thousands of customers and partners across a range of different industries and in government in more than 80 countries around the world. And so this is the common success pattern and the progression of these initiatives that we often see. And this is very much aligned with IDC's 3 horizons that Dan just talked about. So the first steps in the process are around collecting and integrating and transforming and harmonizing and normalizing the disparate data and connecting, exposing, and connecting legacy IT assets. And with the proper foundation around intelligently integrating your IT assets, it often makes it faster and easier to then go on to build and orchestrate and aggregate services. So it can really be the key to agility. And if you have the right organizational structure in place, it can make it much easier for IT and a line of business to start to work more closely together. And so typically, that's how many people think about digital transformation. But what if you can store all of the clean, structured, normalized production data that's flowing through the system, that's flowing through these processes? This then becomes a valuable data repository that houses all of the production data and the metadata. And this provides the data and the visibility for governance. And it allows your data scientists and your analysts to use this rich set of normalized production data to understand what's happening in the business and to use this data to build AI models and machine learning models and predictive models for all sorts of use cases. For example, for fraud detection, for customer churn, for predictive maintenance. Right? Then you can embed these models and these algorithms back into the business processes that you've already created and deployed, and then have them execute in line, in real time, in response to events and transactions. Right? So that's how you start to make these agile processes more intelligent, right, and start to build out these intelligent processes. And over time, with this rich set of production data that's always available to you in the platform, it's normalized, it's always current, then your analysts and your data scientists can continue to tune and refine the models with the latest normalized production data on an ongoing basis, right, so that they can stay current with whatever's happening in the business. Right? And so it's not just about agility, it's also about smarter processes and intelligent processes. And that's what we see as true digital transformation. So this is what we see as the critical technical requirements for a technology platform. So you want to have a single platform that provides most or all of the critical capabilities that not only makes it easy to get started by connecting to and aggregating and orchestrating applications and services, but that has the functionality that can help you scale and build smarter processes as you progress and grow over time. All right, so at the core, it has to provide a complete set of integration capabilities and an embedded database that's capable of handling both transactional workloads as well as analytic workloads at the same time. The database has to be able to store all of the normalized production service data that's generated for governance and for auditing, forensics, and continuous learning, and to provide the clean, normalized production data for your data scientists to use. And it also has to be able to allow you to embed these AI models and the machine learning models that your data scientists are creating back into your real-time business processes so that they can execute in real time in response to incoming events and transactions without having to move the data between systems. It requires the ability to scale elastically in the cloud and on-premise. And of course, you need to have proven mission-critical security capabilities. So this is our incarnation of a data platform or an intelligent core. And here at InterSystems, we call it the InterSystems Iris Data Platform. And it's really the evolution of decades of experience working with thousands of customers and partners on these kinds of projects. And no surprise, it's also consistent with IDC's definition of its DX platform as the intelligent core. It's a single comprehensive data platform. It's a software platform that's built from the ground up on a single architecture and with a single consistent developer experience. It includes a complete interoperability platform to expose and connect to data sources and applications, whether they're legacy or mainframe applications, APIs, databases, flat files, REST services, and so on. It has a low-code graphical development environment that allows developers and business users both to transform and normalize data, to create business rules, to graphically orchestrate and aggregate services together. And at the core is a high-performance database that's capable of supporting a wide range of different data structures, including relational data, document types, object types, key value, multi-dimensional representations, all in the same database. And so we call this multi-model data management. And if you're working with different data from different sources, you should be able to represent the data in the format that makes the most sense in one single database. It also provides very strong capabilities to process transactions and analytic workloads concurrently and at scale, also in the same database, to be able to support these real-time scenarios where you have potentially very high data ingest rates, and you need to run analytics in real time without moving the data to a different environment. And so, for example, we see these kinds of use cases, the need to run analytics on real-time data and on large historical data sets and other reference data and so on when we're dealing with IoT device data for example, predictive maintenance, or financial data for fraud and regulatory compliance, on customer activity or on location data. The platform also provides a range of structured and unstructured analytics capabilities. So the ability to run analytics both on structured data and unstructured data, as well as the ability to incorporate AI and machine learning algorithms that are developed by your data scientists using really any of their tools of choice back into the real-time services and the processes you create. And it supports on-premise and cloud and hybrid deployment environments. And of course, running on the cloud, you can find the InterSystems Iris Data Platform in any of the major cloud marketplaces. So just to conclude, so, where do we see organizations typically begin? And so, we know that digital transformation initiatives can sometimes seem overwhelming. And Dan talked about, the IDC strategic roadmap, breaking the effort into manageable, scopable chunks and accommodating changes as they develop and learning over time as the data and the services evolve and the business evolves. So we've developed a process where we work with our customers and our partners to start small in a very scoped manner and then grow over time without having to boil the ocean up front. It turns out to be a low risk and high value approach. So we start by working with the customer to identify a high value business need. What's an area of the business where you think you can have a real impact? And then identify what are the relevant internal systems and external systems that are involved that you need to expose and connect, who are the people and the groups that are involved, who are the partners that are involved, and then build and orchestrate and aggregate a relatively scoped set of new composite services. And take that data and store it in the database so that you can monitor the production data and run forensics on it and run reports on it, and then use that data to get smarter, analyze the data, potentially build predictive models, AI, machine learning models, and then embed those back into services, and then over time learn and adapt. Right? And then from there, once you have some proven success and quantifiable success, then you can look for adjacent areas of the business to start to work on and grow from there and repeat. So we find this to be a very pragmatic and low-risk approach that generates business value quickly without requiring a massive undertaking. So I'd like to finish with a quick overview of our company. So here at InterSystems, our data management technology is inside thousands of mission-critical applications worldwide. Our software powers the trading platforms that process 15% of the worldwide stock transactions every day. That's processing billions of trades every day while running real-time analytics on the transaction data without slowdowns, without dropping even a single trade, even as trading volumes sometimes spike unexpectedly. It's used to manage the electronic health records of more than 500 million patients around the world. And it's also used in a variety of core applications in logistics, in manufacturing, in IoT, in retail, in government, and in a host of other industries. And one application that I want to talk about that's near and dear to my heart is that it's being used to map the position, the velocity, the temperature, the spectral characteristics of 3 billion objects in our galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy, including 1.6 billion stars. And it does it by continually ingesting data from the Gaia Space Telescope that's orbiting the Earth. And according to the customer, the European Space Agency, it's now providing the underlying data, the spectral data, that they expect will support the work of astronomers for the next 50 years. So pretty cool. So with that, I'd like to pass it back to Gary and open it up for questions.
Thanks, Joe, and thank you, Dan. We've got a couple questions here for you. This first one is for Dan. Dan, from your research in digital transformation initiatives, can you give some examples of how best to get started and identify some of the higher value opportunities?
Sure. Yeah, I think it's something that I mentioned, but I think it's worth emphasizing is that one of the key areas is to look for those operational, or maybe even some will call it tactical decisions, where there's a large volume of data that needs to be processed in real time. And the reason I'm saying that is that there's a lot of great technology to support kind of traditional business intelligence and kind of ad hoc analytics, but it's much more difficult to make a case for those efforts, because the case you're really trying to make is we can kind of more generally make better decisions. Whereas with operational and tactical decision making, even if you can show a little bit of lift from a current state of the process, that can have huge financial benefits for the organization. So I would look for those types of operational decisions and start with those.
That's great. Kind of a follow-up question to that here is, a lot of these opportunities and initiatives have multitudes of stakeholders in them. How do you see these organizations getting these stakeholders to work together on these projects? And is there somebody who traditionally takes forefront and ownership of the projects?
Well, yeah, that's a great question, and obviously not a technical question, and I think it's extremely important. So what we're seeing is that it sometimes depends on the company. There are cases when it is the CEO that really drives the transformation efforts. Some companies have now started to put in place dedicated chief digital officers, but that's still a relative minority. And then we're also seeing kind of the reemergence of the CIO as also a business leader, because the role of the CIO really has changed significantly over the last 10 years. More of their function has been outsourced. More of their function is involved in managing different vendors. And that, I think, gives the CIO a unique opportunity to start driving some of the digital transformation efforts, because while it's not all technology, without technology, it's also not possible. So I think there are a number of, there are different types of leaders. Sometimes it's a very strong business leader in certain industries. So it could be maybe, we've seen it as the head of merchandising in retail, for example, of the head of actuarial services insurance. But that's a more rare case.
Great, thank you. This next question is for Joe. Joe, you mentioned about, preparing data for AI and things in operational applications. Can you give some examples of incorporating data from AI and everything into real-time and operational?
Yeah, I can give you some examples from our customer base. So if I understand the question, it's taking the work of the data scientists and the machine learning models, the AI models, and operationalizing them and embedding them back into business processes. We have product companies. We have a customer that has industrial equipment, and so they have they equip all their equipment that's out in the field now with smart sensors. And they're always phoning home, so they're streaming the operational data back where it's available to the company and the data scientists, and they built machine learning models for predictive maintenance. And in real time, as the data is streaming back, they're running. They not only have real-time operational visibility into what's happening with their products that are being operated by the customers in the field, but they're running predictive maintenance models on them. So they're incorporating the machine learning models. So companies are also doing a lot now with fraud detection, and not only with financial services customers, but what I think is an interesting use case for fraud detection is we have a customer that is embedding fraud detection models in the public sector for e-government when citizens are signing up and registering for government services to detect fraudulent access or citizens or subscribers that should not be able to access those services. So that's an interesting use of fraud detection algorithms. But we also see that as well in the financial services space. I want to quickly share what I think is a really interesting use case with you from the healthcare space. So there's a lot of this now in healthcare. and embedding machine learning algorithms into these processes. So we have a customer that's taking reams of de-identified patient data as well as other medical data, and they're running risk models on patients. And then when individual patients are admitted to a facility, a healthcare facility like a hospital, as part of the admissions processes, the machine learning models run, and they look for whether or not a particular individual is at elevated risk for bad things to happen, like a stroke, or falls, or sepsis, or death, infection, things like that, and that run on admission and throughout the stay of the hospital. And they're seeing real impact in terms of the business. And one of the KPIs, one of the metrics that's really important for a hospital is readmission rates. And so they have to keep their readmission rates down. And incorporating this into their processes, one of our providers, our customer, says that it's reducing readmission rates by 15%, which is a really big deal, and it has financial repercussions for them.
Great, thank you. Joe, another question for you just came in. You mentioned IoT devices, and you talked about predictive maintenance sensors and the vast amounts of data that's being collected. In that sense, how critical is integration and interoperability to a lot of these initiatives?
No, it's huge. I mean, integration is in a variety of scenarios. I mean, it's huge. I think it's the, intelligent integration is at the core of successful digital transformation efforts. And yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that drive success, and a lot of it is organizationally as well as technology. But sort of getting control of your legacy infrastructure and being able to modernize it and expose it and integrate data from inside and outside the organization, I mean, is absolutely huge. And we find is many companies are still sort of stuck on that. And then if you were talking about, I think, AI and machine learning as well, also, that's huge for the data scientists. So, I've seen surveys that say 70 to 80% of the work of data scientists is spent with data wrangling and integration and getting control of the data, and we see that as well. So having this, this platform that can, allow the data to easily be normalized and then be used for visualization and exploration by the data scientists so they can understand the data, and then move on to feature engineering to be able to, turn the data, however it's organized into what's called features that can be used by the machine learning algorithms. All of that is around sort of manipulating the data and integrating the data. I mean, that's still a huge part of the process, and we think where many organizations are still getting stuck. Excellent, thank you. I have time for one last question. I'm going to pose this to Dan. Dan, are there any industries or use cases that you see that are ripe for digital transformation?
Yeah, we get this question often at IDC, and it's a function of the ability of the players in the industry to start investing in the transformation, because I think the possibilities are there for every single industry. We have seen some great examples from financial services, from manufacturing, some of the bigger industries, which often have the funding, but we've also seen it in healthcare, and we've seen it in higher education. Organizations in higher education, for example, that have really invested in this type of a platform that we're talking about today to do things like understand and apply predictive analytics to the student dropout rates, which has been an important issue for some higher education institutions. So really, I don't think anybody should be feeling left out. I think there's opportunity across industries. Again, I think the use cases should be the ones where there's an availability of large amounts of trackable data. I think that's a precursor. Yes, the data needs to be cleaned and prepared and made ready for analytics. But I think those are the low-hanging fruit. That's the low-hanging fruit. Those are the opportunities that people should jump on as we speak.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Dan, and thank you, Joe. I'd like to thank you all for attending. I'd like to ask that you all please keep an eye out for an email, as we'll be sharing a recording of this webinar for viewing and sharing with your colleagues. Also, we'll be providing you a complimentary access to Dan's white paper on the intelligent core. And finally, we'll be providing a link for a quick feedback form survey to tell us what you thought of your webinar and an opportunity to suggest some future topics. That concludes today's webinar. Once again, I'd like to thank you.